All right, so this question came to us from Deborah via YouTube. She messaged us on there. She said, I've been taking your probiotic essentials for years. I know they're of good quality. My question is, should I be taking different ones on occasion? So we have several different probiotics. You got the base probiotic pro, and then the 225 and the 100s and I don't even know what all the differences are. She's wondering if she needs to change it up.
Yeah. I think this would be a good refresher just of, looking at not only the quality of specific supplements, like just in general with supplements, but specifically probiotics. So for example, our dad, Joe, he sought out a specific manufacturer initially for, the formulation of the probiotic essentials. He had them, he not only wanted a specific sort of milieu of probiotic strains, but wanted to make sure that they were shelf stable, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
All of that's to say that the manufacturing process of a probiotic specifically is really important. Shelf stability of a probiotic supplement is really important. And then finally, to make sure that, the final product and testing of the probiotic is really important.
Right.
And so with the probiotic essentials and with the others that we carry, that all of those criteria are met. Some of them you refrigerate, some of them you do not. The probiotic essentials specifically, this company utilizes like some sort of freeze drying technique in different things that are encapsulating the actual strains that are keeping them active by the time they actually make it to consumer, and then last through their expiration dates. And again, we just look at, is the manufacturer GMP compliant? So there's good manufacturing processes. The FDA inspection of the labs is important. Again, especially with something, especially when you're dealing with something like a probiotic. So I know I wanted that to be much shorter, but again, we talked about fish oils too. Like there are some products that the facility that it's coming from is massively important. All of those things outside of the actual product itself are critical here. And so with those products, whether she stays with probiotic essentials or moves to the Pro 100 or whatever, they're all met. All of those criteria are met.
Okay.
So I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, just the one quick thing about the testing, and you covered it all, except one little point that we've actually had them tested at expiration date too. Mm-hmm. That's obviously not something you can do right away, but we had them tested at expiration to make sure, and the company kind of knows this going in. There's going to be some degradation. And sometimes this will backfire because people will say, oh, well, these like a fresh batch and things like that. But in terms of what's on the label, technically they are a little hot. They're over label whenever we first make them, and then they're still above label whenever they're at their expiration date. Because again, when you're dealing with live organisms, there's going to be some degradation. You're opening and closing a bottle, that kind of thing. So I think that's a key thing too, is because if somebody's making them right. If they're testing the levels right at whenever they're made, and then not at 3 years later, and if they're just barely making cutoff initially, you could be well below label at expiration.
They really
that's one thing too. Yeah, it's not something my dad would have thought of, per se, but that's something that, when you're working with a good reputable company, that they kind of foresee for you. Like, hey, we know whatever. If you're going to put 2.5 years on this, there could be 15%, that kind of thing. And they kind of guided us in that. But yeah, we've actually had them tested at expiration.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Deborah is wondering, should she change it up? Is there a reason if she's taking the essentials and it's working, is there a reason for her to change up?
Yeah. So it would it would be useful to know, potentially why she started taking them.
Yep.
I think that would provide at least a good framework to, help better answer questions like this, regardless of what the product is. But let's say theoretically, maybe she had some constipation, or there was some sort of GI disturbance, or she had, a long history of antibiotic use, any of those sort of, glaring indications where probiotics could be beneficial. So if we just pretend maybe that's the case, she heard they were healthy, or let's just say she heard they were good for, colonizing the gut and for all that kind of stuff. In that case, there would really be no reason to switch it up, just as a general answer. Yeah. Now, if she was still, having, whether it's diarrhea or constipation or issues associated with chronic antibiotic use, there are different products, and we don't maybe necessarily need to go through every single one. There are different products that are basically just have a greater number of specific strains that could be better tailored to fit a certain indication and turn up the volume a little bit. But I don't want to say that with like utmost kind of confidence either, because there's really just not a lot out there in the way of like this specific amount of strains is perfect for this specific indication.
Right.
And we, it's tough. I mean, this is an active area of research, but we know sort of logically, you may not be best suited to throw a general product like that at something where she has such a specific GI issue or a, urogenital issue, something like that.
So if she's just taking them because they're a great idea, they're kind of one of the essential things that is often recommended, and everything seems fine, stick with it, no reason to change. But if she was taking them for a specific issue and is not having the relief that she would expect, then it's time to consider amping it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I think too, just down into more specific, we're always going to be kind of middle ground here. There are reasons why you need to take an antibiotic, period.
Yeah.
If you are at that point in time, and for whatever reason you need to take an antibiotic, there is a very specific different one we recommend. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because essentially it colonizes in the colon, but it's a yeast derivative, yeast cell wall, essentially, that an antibiotic that kills bacterial cell walls. It's really how they work. Primarily, they're breaking apart the cell walls of these organisms. Can't touch this flora probiotic, Saccharomyces boulardii. It congregates in the colon as well, which is where you get a lot of the short-term side effects of antibiotics, the diarrhea, etc.
Right.
So if you're on an antibiotic, your probiotic's essentially going to get killed. So you switch over to something like Flora and you take it while you're on it.
Okay.
Secondarily, along those lines, if you've gone through the antibiotic, maybe you've had some complications. Maybe they've had to change your antibiotic because it wasn't the right one or wasn't working. Maybe you've had a little battle. Then you may want a little bit of a reset, especially if some of the GI symptoms are going on. A little prolonged afterwards, then you would do something like a 225 or a 100 for a period of time. You do like a little taper, use the 225 for 15 days, use the 100 for a month, then go back to the probiotic essential, something like that, just to kind of recolonize in a shorter term. If again, your average, 7 days of amoxicillin is probably not going to cause that for the average person, but some people have histories.
Yeah.
Even if it's been 5-10 years, they have a long history of antibiotic use. Again, sometimes people, you do have a little battle where you're switching and you're on different ones or you're on a second course 3 weeks later, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a little reset is warranted. Also something like leaky gut, which can be manifesting in other things. You could have some skin issues, some joint issues, some just chronic diarrhea, chronic nausea, things like that potentially maybe is leaky gut caused, that you do a little more of intensive treatment for that. There are other products you would use to kind of help close those junctions in the gut, soothe the gut. So there are other things you'd use, or maybe you're having some indigestion, you'd use an enzyme. So there are other gut health things, but specifically back to the probiotics, that's still foundational if you're having GI issues, we believe. And then into that leaky gut and into the antibiotic use, those are just some nuances to it.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So for general folks, beyond just, was it Deborah? Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Beyond Deborah, if somebody is taking a probiotic, an antibiotic, it's worth switching over to the Flora Essentials. Taking your probiotics isn't going to help anything in that moment. You want to go to the Flora Essentials and then do the reset with maybe some 225 down to 100, down to the Essentials. Got it. Okay, cool. I hope that helps.